The frozen ground of Bastogne trembled beneath the thunderous roar of German artillery on December 22, 1944. Snow fell like ash from a burning sky, each flake carrying the metallic taste of gunpowder and desperation. Through the smoke-choked streets, Staff Sergeant Tommy Hendricks gripped the steering wheel of his bullet-riddled supply truck, his knuckles white as the winter landscape around him. Behind him, 5,000 American paratroopers of the 101st Airborne Division were trapped in a deadly siege, their ammunition running dangerously low, medical supplies nearly depleted. The German panzer divisions had encircled Bastogne completely, turning the strategic Belgian crossroads into a frozen hell where heroes were forged and souls were tested. Tommy's breath formed crystalline clouds in the sub-zero air as he stared at the treacherous road ahead. Somewhere in the distance, the distinctive rumble of Tiger tanks echoed through the Ardennes forest like a death knell. His hands shook, not from the cold, but from the weight of an impossible mission that could save thousands or doom them all. What Tommy didn't know was that among his fellow soldiers lurked a traitor whose betrayal would soon turn this desperate supply run into a gauntlet of unimaginable horror. The man he trusted most was about to become his greatest enemy, and the choices made in the next few hours would determine whether Bastogne would become America's greatest triumph or its most devastating defeat. The war had already stolen everything from Tommy Hendricks. Now it demanded something even more precious – his faith in the brotherhood he'd sworn to protect. Tommy Hendricks had never intended to become a hero. Just 18 months earlier, he'd been hauling grain across the wheat fields of Kansas, his biggest worry being whether his aging Ford would make it to the next town. But Pearl Harbor changed everything, including the quiet farm boy who'd never fired a shot in anger. The memory of his younger brother Danny's funeral still haunted him. Danny had enlisted first, eager to prove himself a man. The telegram arrived on a Tuesday. Killed in action, Normandy Beach. Tommy had held his mother as she collapsed, her tears soaking into his work shirt, while his father stood silent, staring at fields that no longer seemed to matter. "I'm going, Pa," Tommy had whispered that night. "Danny's gone, but this war ain't over." Now, surrounded by the frozen carnage of the Battle of the Bulge, Tommy understood the true cost of that promise. His convoy partner, Sergeant Mike O'Sullivan, crouched beside him in the truck cab, nervously checking his Thompson submachine gun. O'Sullivan was a Boston Irish tough guy who'd become Tommy's closest friend during their brutal months fighting across France. But something had changed in O'Sullivan recently. Ever since they'd reached Belgium, he'd been secretive, disappearing for private conversations with officers Tommy didn't recognize. There were whispered phone calls and maps marked with positions that seemed too detailed for a simple supply sergeant to possess. The relationship that had once felt like brotherhood now carried an undercurrent of suspicion that made Tommy's stomach clench with dread. When O'Sullivan claimed he knew shortcuts through German lines that other drivers had missed, Tommy wanted to believe his friend was just being resourceful. The alternative was too terrible to consider. Inside Bastogne's perimeter, General Anthony McAuliffe paced the basement of a bombed-out school that served as his command post. His paratroopers were down to their last rounds, and German propaganda loudspeakers taunted them hourly with promises of warm surrender versus frozen death. The famous "nuts" response to German surrender demands bought time but not ammunition. "Sir," a young lieutenant reported, "Hendricks and O'Sullivan are our last hope. Every other supply convoy has been destroyed or turned back. If they don't make it through—" McAuliffe nodded grimly. He'd seen too many good men die because of impossible orders, but 5,000 lives hung in the balance. Outside, German snipers had turned every corner into a potential killing ground. while panzer units patrolled the surrounding forests like metal predators. Hey, let me know in the comments where you're watching this from. Are you in the States, Europe, or somewhere else around the world? I love hearing from viewers everywhere. Tommy checked his cargo one final time. Medical supplies, ammunition, and communication equipment that could coordinate relief efforts. But hidden beneath legitimate supplies, O'Sullivan had insisted on loading mysterious crates marked Priority Command. When Tommy asked about their contents, O'Sullivan's eyes had gone cold. Just drive, Kansas.
Some things are above your pay grade. That response had shattered something fundamental between them. Tommy realized his closest friend had become a stranger, carrying secrets that felt like betrayal. As artillery shells whistled overhead, Tommy faced a horrible truth. In war, the enemy wasn't always wearing a different uniform. The weight of impossible choices pressed down like the winter sky itself, heavy with the promise of storms that would test every bond forged in the crucible of combat. The convoy rolled out at 0400 hours, 3 trucks carrying humanity's last hope through a landscape transformed into a frozen graveyard. Tommy led the formation, his headlights cutting through pre-dawn darkness, while O'Sullivan rode shotgun, constantly checking a map that seemed far too detailed for standard military issue. Behind them, Corporal Eddie Kowalski and Private First Class James Preacher Washington manned the second truck, their nervous chatter crackling over the radio. The third vehicle carried Sergeant First Class Maria Santos, the only female truck driver in their unit, a woman whose mechanical genius had kept their vehicles running despite impossible odds. "Tommy, you seeing this?" Santos's voice cut through the static. "These road markers, they're too fresh. Someone's been through here recently." O'Sullivan grabbed the radio before Tommy could respond. "Maintain radio silence unless it's an emergency. German listening posts are everywhere." The sharp command sent ice through Tommy's veins. Since when did O'Sullivan give orders to senior NCOs? But before he could question it, machine gun fire erupted from the tree line ahead. Tommy yanked the wheel hard right as bullets spiderwebbed the windshield. "Contact front!" Kowalski screamed over the radio. "We're taking heavy fire!" But something was wrong. The German positions seemed to know exactly where the convoy would be, their fields of fire perfectly positioned to funnel the trucks into a killing zone. Tommy's military training kicked in. This wasn't a random encounter. This was a carefully planned ambush. As if reading his thoughts, O'Sullivan pulled a Luger pistol from his jacket and pressed it against Tommy's ribs. "Keep driving, farm boy, straight ahead, no deviations." The betrayal hit Tommy like a physical blow. His best friend, the man who'd pulled him from a burning half-track outside Cannes, the soldier who'd shared his last cigarette during the coldest nights, was a German agent. "Why, Mike?" Tommy's voice cracked with more than tactical urgency. "We bled together. We buried our dead together." O'Sullivan's face remained stone. "You Americans think war is about friendship. It's about survival. My real name is Michel Zimmerman. My family died in your bombing raids over Hamburg. Every supply run I've sabotaged. Every convoy I've led into ambush. It's justice." Before we continue this incredible story, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. We're trying to reach 1,000 subscribers, and your support helps us bring you more amazing untold stories from World War II. The radio crackled with Santos's voice. "Tommy, something's not right with Eddie's truck. It's smoking bad and Preacher's not responding." Through his mirrors, Tommy watched the second truck veer off the road, black smoke pouring from its engine. The mechanical problems hadn't been coincidental. They'd been sabotaged. O'Sullivan had been systematically destroying the convoy from within. But Tommy had grown up fixing farm equipment with his father, learning that sometimes you had to think 3 steps ahead of disaster. During the loading process, he'd noticed O'Sullivan's mysterious crates were positioned to block access to critical ammunition. Tommy had quietly rearranged the cargo, moving the most vital supplies to hidden compartments Santos had welded into her truck. "You made one mistake, Mike," Tommy said, his hand steady on the wheel despite the gun pressed against his side. "You forgot I'm not just some farm kid anymore. I'm a soldier who learns from his friends, even the ones who betray him." In a move that would have made his high school wrestling coach proud, Tommy slammed on the brakes while grabbing O'Sullivan's wrist, using the sudden deceleration to drive the traitor's head into the dashboard. The Luger discharged harmlessly into the roof as Tommy seized control. Behind them, Santos had stopped to rescue Kowalski and Washington from their sabotage vehicle, her own truck now carrying the mission's entire hope. But German forces were closing in from 3 directions, their positions coordinated by intelligence O'Sullivan had been feeding them for weeks. Tommy keyed the radio with grim determination. "Santos, Kowalski, Preacher, this is it. Everything we've got, everything we are, it all comes down to the next 5 miles.
We're going to save those boys in Bastogne, or we're going to die trying." The war had taken his brother, his innocence, and now his closest friend. But it hadn't taken his resolve to protect the men depending on him. The final approach to Bastogne became a gauntlet of fire and steel that would test every lesson learned in the crucible of war. Tommy's truck, now carrying the unconscious O'Sullivan zip-tied in the passenger seat, led Santos through a maze of burning vehicles and German roadblocks that seemed impossibly coordinated. "Tiger tank, 12 o'clock!" Santos screamed over the radio as an enormous German tank emerged from behind a destroyed farmhouse, its 88mm cannon swinging toward their position. Tommy's mind raced through calculations his farm boy past had never prepared him for. The road ahead offered no cover, but his father had always taught him that when machinery fails, you improvise with what's at hand. The mysterious crates O'Sullivan had loaded contained more than just betrayal. They held experimental radio equipment designed to coordinate German artillery strikes. "Santos, I need you to trust me completely," Tommy radioed, his voice steadier than his hammering heart. "When I give the signal, flood those radio frequencies with everything you've got." Behind them, Kowalski and Washington had recovered enough to man the machine gun mounted on Santos's truck. Preacher's voice, weak but determined, crackled through. "Lord, if you're listening, we could use some divine intervention right about now." The Tiger's main gun fired, the shell screaming past Tommy's cab so close he felt the heat through the metal. But Tommy had noticed something during O'Sullivan's betrayal. The German positions were too perfectly coordinated, relying entirely on radio communication to maintain their lethal efficiency. "Now, Santos!" Santos triggered every piece of radio equipment simultaneously, flooding German frequencies with a cacophony of static and false coordinates. The effect was immediate and devastating. German units began firing on their own positions, confused by conflicting orders that turned their coordination into chaos. Tommy gunned the engine straight toward the Tiger tank, a suicidal charge that made no tactical sense until the last possible moment. He yanked the wheel hard left, using the tank's massive bulk as a shield, while Santos's truck slipped through on the right. The German infantry, blinded by their own radio chaos, fired wildly in all directions. But victory came with an unbearable price. A Panzerfaust rocket streaked from a hidden position, striking Santos's truck directly. The explosion lifted the vehicle into the air like a child's toy, flipping end over end before crashing into a snow-filled ditch. "Santos, Kowalski, Preacher!" Tommy's voice broke as he watched his friend's truck burn. Through the flames he saw movement. Santos crawling away from the wreckage, dragging an unconscious Kowalski, while Washington provided covering fire despite a severe head wound. The final mile to Bastogne's perimeter stretched like an eternity of frozen hell.
Tommy's truck, now alone and battered beyond recognition, carried not just supplies, but the weight of every sacrifice made to reach this moment. O'Sullivan stirred in the passenger seat, blood streaming from his forehead, his eyes filled with something that might have been regret. "You don't understand. My sister. They have my sister. If I didn't—" Tommy's anger crumbled into something more complex, a recognition that war created victims on every side, that even betrayal could be born from love twisted by impossible choices. But understanding didn't change the mission. We all lost family, Mike. The difference is what we chose to do about it. Ahead, the first American positions came into view. Desperate paratroopers manning frozen foxholes, their ammunition so low they were rationing individual bullets. These men had held Bastogne through 7 days of relentless assault, their determination the only thing standing between German victory and Allied survival. Tommy's battered truck lurched through the final checkpoint as medics rushed to treat Santos's team. The supplies that had cost so much blood would keep the 101st Airborne fighting until Patton's relief force could break the siege. But the true victory wasn't measured in ammunition delivered or lives saved. It was found in the moment when broken men chose to sacrifice everything for brothers who had become family, proving that even in war's darkest hours, humanity could triumph over the machinery of destruction. 3 months after the liberation of Bastogne, Tommy Hendricks sat in a military hospital in Paris, staring at a letter from his mother that he'd read dozens of times.
The words blurred together through eyes that had seen too much, hands that trembled not from cold, but from memories that played on endless loop. The official reports called it a tactical masterpiece. 5,000 American lives saved, the German offensive blunted, the tide of the European war permanently turned. What the reports couldn't capture was the sound Santos made when she learned that Kowalski hadn't survived his injuries, or the way Preacher Washington now flinched at sudden noises, his faith in divine protection forever shaken. Santos visited Tommy daily, her left arm still in a sling from the explosion that had nearly killed them all. The woman who'd once joked that she could fix anything mechanical now spoke in quiet tones about the pieces of herself that seemed beyond repair. "You ever wonder if we saved those boys in Bastogne, or if they saved us?" she asked during one of their silent vigils beside Kowalski's empty bed. Tommy had been wrestling with that question since the moment O'Sullivan, Michel Zimmerman, had been transferred to a prisoner of war camp. The betrayal still burned, but it had been tempered by understanding that war created impossible choices for everyone caught in its machinery. The German agent had revealed during interrogation that his sister Maria had been captured by the Gestapo and used as leverage to turn him. She died in a concentration camp 2 weeks before the Bastogne mission, making his betrayal both meaningless and complete. O'Sullivan's last words to Tommy had been a broken plea: "Take care of the men who are still worth saving." The psychological evaluation report spoke of combat stress reactions and adjustment disorders, clinical terms that failed to capture the fundamental truth. War didn't just wound bodies, it fractured souls. Tommy found himself waking in cold sweats, not from nightmares of German artillery, but from dreams where he failed to save his friends, where the supply convoy never reached Bastogne, where 5,000 American boys died because he hadn't been brave enough or smart enough or fast enough. Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, the psychiatrist assigned to his case, had gentle eyes that reminded Tommy of his mother. During their sessions, she helped him understand that survival carried its own burden, the weight of wondering why he lived when better men died. Survivor's guilt is common among combat veterans, she explained, but healing begins when you realize that honoring the dead means living fully, not dying slowly. The transformation came gradually, like spring melting winter's grip on the Kansas plains. Tommy began writing letters to the families of men who hadn't made it home. Kowalski's parents in Detroit, the widow of a paratrooper who died defending the medical station where Tommy's supplies had been distributed, dozens of families who needed to know their loved ones hadn't died for nothing. Those letters became something more than obligation. They became connection. The responses revealed that Tommy's actions had rippled far beyond that frozen December night.
Lieutenant Marcus Webb, who'd received crucial medical supplies, had survived to become a doctor who would save thousands more lives. Sergeant First Class Antonio Ricci had used the ammunition Tommy delivered to hold a critical crossroads, allowing an entire regiment to escape encirclement. 6 months later, Tommy stood in a cemetery in Normandy, reading names carved in white marble crosses that stretched toward the horizon like an army of the honored dead. Santos stood beside him, her arm finally healed, her spirit slowly mending through work with other female veterans struggling to find their place in a world that barely acknowledged their service. "They're not really gone, are they?" Santos said, her voice carrying hard-won wisdom. "As long as we remember why they fought, what they believed in, they're still with us." Tommy nodded, understanding finally why his brother Danny had chosen to enlist first. It wasn't about glory or revenge. It was about standing between darkness and light, ensuring that the values worth dying for would survive to be worth living for. The war had taken his innocence, his brother, his closest friend, and his unshakable faith in simple answers to complex questions. But it had given him something more valuable, the knowledge that ordinary people could perform extraordinary acts when love for others outweighed fear for themselves. Years later, when Tommy returned to Kansas to take over the family farm, he would tell his children about Uncle Danny, about Santos and Kowalski and Preacher Washington, about a German agent whose love for his sister had led him down a dark path, and about the night when everything hung in the balance, and somehow, impossibly, love had proven stronger than hate.
The wheat fields looked the same, but Tommy saw them differently now. Not as boundaries, but as endless possibilities, golden waves that connected his small corner of the world to something infinitely larger and more meaningful. Tommy Hendricks lived to be 89 years old, long enough to see his grandchildren graduate college and to witness the fall of the Berlin Wall on television. But until his final day, he kept a faded photograph in his wallet, not of his family or his farm, but of Santos, Kowalski, Preacher, and even O'Sullivan, taken during a brief moment of laughter between missions in France. When asked about his Medal of Honor, awarded for actions at Bastogne, Tommy would always deflect attention to the men who didn't come home. "Heroes are the ones who don't get to tell their stories," he'd say, his eyes holding depths that only those who'd walked through hell could understand. The truck that carried salvation to 5,000 trapped paratroopers was eventually scrapped for metal, but its legacy lived on in ways both measurable and immeasurable. The ammunition Tommy delivered helped break the siege of Bastogne, contributing directly to Germany's ultimate defeat. The medical supplies saved 347 wounded soldiers who would return home to build families, start businesses, and contribute to a world their sacrifice had helped preserve. But perhaps the greatest victory was quieter, more personal. It was found in Tommy's decision to forgive O'Sullivan's betrayal, understanding that war's greatest casualty was often the capacity for human connection. It lived in Santos's post-war work, helping other veterans find purpose after trauma. It echoed in Preacher Washington's sermons about finding faith not despite suffering, but because of the love that endures through it. The frozen fields of Bastogne eventually bloomed again, Belgian farmers harvesting crops from soil once soaked with blood. Children played where tanks had rumbled, their laughter a testament to the future that Tommy and his generation had bought with everything they had to give. In the end, their story proved that heroism isn't the absence of fear, it's the presence of love stronger than fear, connections deeper than self-preservation, and the unshakable belief that some things are worth any sacrifice to protect. If this incredible story of courage and sacrifice moved you, smash that like button and subscribe for more untold tales from history's greatest conflicts. What other World War II stories would you like to see covered? Drop your suggestions in the comments below, and don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss our latest historical deep dives.
History isn't just about dates and battles. It's about the extraordinary humans who shaped our world. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.